Laura and I are bringing you the case of Georgia Jean Weckler, an 8-year-old girl who disappeared from her half-mile-long driveway on May 1st, 1947, just outside of Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. This story is quite the rabbit hole of a mystery, and we are going to jump into that right now.
May 1st, 1947 would start off normal for the Weckler family. It was a rainy morning, and so the children would get a ride to school instead of riding their bikes as usual. A slight change in their routine would set in motion a scenario in which every parent fears. 8-year-old Georgia Jean Weckler would be abducted from the end of her half-mile-long driveway after being dropped off after school by a neighbor. Georgia would never be found, and a long search for answers would bring them no closer to justice.
So May 1st, 1947, Georgia Jean Weckler goes missing from the end of her driveway. She's abducted, she's taken, and she's never seen again. She's witnessed by the neighbor that had dropped her off, checking her mail, and then she goes to pick her flowers, and the neighbor says she, drives away, and that was it. She assumed all was well. She
didn't see anybody around.
No, and she just went on home. Georgia, however, didn't make it into her house, and her mother would not report her missing for another, 2.5 hours, 6 p.m.? 6 p.m. when Georgia had probably been abducted around 3:30 p.m. according to the neighbor who dropped her off. She stated that approximately 3:15 to 3:30 p.m. she dropped off Georgia, and then she had left. And it's funny because just 10 minutes after she had dropped her off, there's another witness who sees, was it 1936 black Ford sedan?
Yep.
Right? Yeah. And they witnessed this vehicle speeding away at 3:40 p.m. And this correlates with the time frame for when Georgia was dropped off and abducted. And so this car becomes suspect number one. And it's crazy. We'll get into more about people who witnessed seeing this vehicle through town this very same day.
Georgia Jean Weckler was last seen near her rural farm home in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin at approximately 3:30 p.m. May 1st, 1947. She had been released from school earlier than her siblings that day and sought a ride from her neighbor, Mrs. Carl Flurick, who had been there picking up her own children from the Oakland Elementary School. Mrs. Flurick dropped Georgia off at the end of her half-mile-long driveway leading up to her house, and Georgia had told the neighbor she was going to pick flowers from the nearby woods to decorate her basket for the May Day celebration. The neighbor then stated she saw Georgia collect the mail from her mailbox and begin walking up the long driveway. This was the last official sighting of Georgia, and neither she nor the letters she was carrying were ever seen again.
All right, so it was Mrs. Carl Florick. She was the neighbor who had gave Georgia a ride home that day. Now, she had said that Georgia approached her and asked her to give her a ride home since she didn't want to wait for her other siblings because they had got a ride to school and they didn't ride their bikes this day. And so Georgia was like, hey, I'm trying to get home. I don't want to sit around and wait. And Mrs. Florick was like, absolutely. I'm already here picking up my kids. Come on in. And she takes Georgia home, drops Georgia off, and everything seems normal. And Mrs. Florick said that she assumed Georgia went into the house and she went on her way. She was gone. So let's get into the Weckler family a little bit. A pretty prominent family in Fort Atkinson, right? I mean, they're very well-to-do. Georgia's very, they're a farmstead. They're really, really close-knit with the entire community. Everybody knew George Weckler. They knew his children. And Georgia, I was reading that she was a first-year 4-H student, and 4-H was pretty big in their family. I mean, they were very into like the animal scene. You know, they were farmers, exactly. And so that too sticks out to me because I was a farm kid. I grew up on a half-mile-long driveway myself, and I had been dropped off by the school bus multiple times. And I just think about like, man, it only takes that one time for something to go wrong. Georgia goes missing. Her mom hasn't reported her missing because she assumes Georgia is with her father. And George Weckler had gone to Jefferson where they were getting his vehicle fixed and tended to, and he assumes Georgia went home.
Georgia's mother, Eleanor Weckler, was not initially concerned when her child did not come home with the other children. She'd assumed that George had picked her up, but at 6 p.m. when George came home and Georgia was not with him, the Wecklers immediately phoned police and over 200 people would begin a thorough search of the area from that evening into the early morning hours of the next day. Reports of witnesses seeing a suspicious vehicle, a 1936 black Ford sedan to be specific, that same afternoon at a few different locations, and one location being right down the very road Georgia was abducted from. Deep tire tracks were also found as if someone was peeling out in a hurry. Witnesses said that the driver was a blond male in his 20s. This man, however, was never officially identified, even after several people were questioned over the years.
Okay, so yeah, Georgia Jean's missing now. It's 6 p.m. George comes home. His wife is in a panic at this point because she's going, "Where's Georgia?" And George is like, "Well, I thought she was here with you." And she goes, "But she's not. I thought you'd picked her up." So this is when a large manhunt begins looking for Georgia, and they do something called like a grid search where they literally like, yep, they do. They just like link out and they start taking section by section grids and
like
looking.
A hunting drive.
Yes, exactly. You know, they're getting very thorough, trying to find some clues and answers as to what happened to Georgia, but unfortunately, there's nothing found. There's nothing
Which
found.
is also very strange.
So strange, you know.
No hair,
no nothing, no
no
mail,
article of clothing.
the basket. She's carrying her school stuff. There's nothing. Like there's not even a book, a piece of paper from her school books. You know, I mean, I think that's just completely bizarre. And I was reading that she also all the kids took a lunch. So she would have had a lunch bucket, she would have had her bag with her school gear, she would have had the mail, and her Mayday basket, because she had made the Mayday basket at school and was going to decorate it at home and was going to pick her flowers. So she would have had all these items.
And she had a little sweater on.
Yep, and none of that was found. Her shoes, like
her shoes, nothing.
You know, and that's
the dogs couldn't pick up her scent.
There were also reports of a number of people saying that they seen a man downtown Fort Atkinson struggling with a young girl who might have looked like Georgia. The man was a fit for the description of the blonde man, and he was also driving a black Ford sedan. Witnesses stated that they assumed the child was the daughter of the man, and they thought nothing of the incident until news had spread of George's disappearance. Police then grasped onto the idea that maybe Georgia had been abducted for money, but as the days passed and no ransom came, it was then assumed that a potential child predator had taken Georgia Jean Weckler.
Now they need somebody, you know, they're looking for witnesses that have seen anything suspicious in the area. And this is when we get brought to a teacher from the school, Ives School, across from Oakland School. It was Ives School, Mrs. Twist from Ives School, who had said she had seen a suspicious vehicle, a 1936 black Ford sedan, sitting out in the driveway watching the children, right?
Yeah,
like he's
kind of creeping.
Yeah, exactly. Just being a real sketchy individual. And so she goes to approach this vehicle, and this is around 3:15. And the kids are just getting off, obviously. The elementary students were released before the older students. And he's just watching all of them like a disgusting pig. And so she comes to approach this vehicle, and he takes off. He peels on out of there like a bat out of hell, and he's gone. And it would be, at this time, another person pulling into, I think, was it Highway J? What was her road again? Was it 12 or J?
It was off Highway 12.
It was off of Highway 12. So it was a vehicle pulling onto the highway that saw this black Ford sedan once again peeling away from the Weckler home, like the same area, probably just a little bit down the road. He witnesses them peeling on out. So he sees this vehicle though, and it's in the same area where they've, like, Mrs. Twist has seen this car, this individual here has seen this car, and now they're looking for people out inside Fort Atkinson that have also maybe seen this Ford sedan. There's reports of a sandy blonde-haired man with a girl in the back of his vehicle who, what does he do to her? She's screaming, right? And he just kind of tells her to, like, shut up, and he puts something over her head, or they say they thought he saw him, like, do something to her to that effect. And then he gets in the car and they drive away. And nobody thought anything of this. They just assumed this was a father and daughter dispute. I guess this is the 40s. Times are different. I don't know. I wouldn't be putting anything over my children's head if I was frustrated with them. I'm going to tell you that right now. That's messed up, but...
The only person to really match the reports was one Buford Senate. Senate was a convicted rapist and would later be charged for a different murder. It would be while he was serving his life sentence in the fall of 1947 for that crime that he would confess to Georgia's kidnapping and alleged murder. He would go on to say that he and a companion kidnapped Georgia for ransom, and they would accidentally overdose her on sleeping pills. Senate then claimed to have thrown Georgia's body into the Blue River near the town of Blue River, Wisconsin. The river was searched and ultimately came up empty-handed. In Buford's hideout, described as a foxhole in a wooded area near the river, officials would find what they claimed to be ashes, and they would send these ashes for testing, but they returned as inconclusive, and no new clues would lead investigators to answers. Senate was never charged, and law enforcement was uncertain if Buford was even involved. He later recanted his confession and would die in Wisconsin prison in 2008. It should also be noted that Senate was convicted for sexual assault and rape of a 9-year-old girl and later a 13-year-old.
Yeah, so they had witnessed that vehicle. Now this car is getting around town. People are talking about it, and there's one guy that starts coming to everybody's mind, and that's Buford Senate. So at this point, they need a reason why Georgia's been kidnapped. They need to know why. Why would somebody want to take Georgia? For what? This is when the idea of a ransom starts coming into play. They're starting to think like, well, maybe Georgia was taken because Georgia's, they're a well-to-do family. They have a decent amount of money. They lived in a very nice home. They were living very well. And so they assumed that, hey, maybe somebody wants the money here. Maybe somebody's looking to get some funds from the Wecklers. But after a few days pass and there's no ransom, this is when investigators start getting really worried. I mean, now Buford does confess, but again, that confession's a little wonky. It's not exactly reliable. He said that he kidnapped Georgia, he was going to hold her for ransom, and he accidentally overdoses her on sleeping pills. Well, police search and they find nothing. There's nothing, but they do find Buford's hideout, his little foxhole. Yep. And in there is some pretty incriminating things, I suppose, to law enforcement. They find ashes, which they weren't sure if they were human remains, possibly. Thinking, like, did Buford have those letters? Did he burn those in there? And perhaps maybe there was some truth to the confession, but he wasn't giving it all. Maybe that's hard to say.
Buford was not the only one to confess to Georgia's murder. A few people did, including a convicted murderer from Nebraska. Nothing could be proven, and most of the confessors would later recant. Georgia's case would receive its mention once more in 1957 when officers in Plainfield, Wisconsin arrested Edward Theodore Gein for murder. His house of horrors had been raided by police, sealing Ed Gein's fate into infamy. If you were unfamiliar with his crimes, he was most notable for his cannibalism and fashioning household items such as lamps and dining ware from human bone and flesh. He would become a suspect to law enforcement due to his similar vehicle and him possibly being in the area at the time of Georgia's disappearance. He was rather quickly ruled out, and Ed Gein would later die in a mental institution in 1984.
Edward Gein. Now, Ed Gein had become a suspect in this case because they thought, well, he had already been a monster. He'd been convicted for all these atrocious crimes in Plainfield, right? Mm-hmm. And so they thought maybe, possibly, because he did have connections in the area. He had been, yeah. So they thought maybe he came out to visit, and just so happened to run across Georgia. Again, he was discredited pretty soon on, but it again is pretty cool to see that he shows up. Like, that was so random. I was like, wait, what? Ed Gein? Like, you kidding me? Wow. But yeah, so
He's pretty notorious.
So it's kind of like, it reminds me of the Black Dahlia, where everybody starts confessing to murder.
Yeah.
Everybody starts like writing in letters to law enforcement stating like, yes, I'm responsible. I'm the killer. I did it. There's no evidence. This happens in Georgia's case. There were a few individuals that had told law enforcement that they were the ones responsible for the death of Georgia, even all the way to a convicted murderer in Nebraska. These never panned out, of course. And again, I don't know what people had to gain by saying that, by confessing this.
There was a ton of tips too.
Yeah.
Like, I know where she's buried.
Yeah. A lot of people were calling in and saying like, I know the location, and they would follow up on these tips. They would go out and try to investigate and see what they could find, and unfortunately, everything came up inconclusive. There was just nothing to really point them in the right direction to find Georgia. Now, this case does come back to light again. Like, what was that in 2000 and? Yeah, it was like early 2000s. So, but they receive a tip, and law enforcement Yep, they're still taking information, and they did. They went out and they gathered up a search party, and they go out and they start looking through these woods or this area, this wooded area where somebody had tipped them off to. What the tip was, we don't know. They never made that public, but it was obviously credible enough for them to gather up teams and equipment to go out there and search for Georgia. But nothing came of it, nothing at all. So that again was another lead gone.
Curiously enough, it was said that Georgia was known to have made remarks about having a fear of being kidnapped. So many questions left unanswered, and so many theories as to what could have happened to this little girl. Georgia Jean Weckler remains missing to this day, and though her immediate family has died, her remaining relatives stay vigilant that one day they will find out what exactly happened to young Georgia Jean Weckler. Was Buford really guilty? Were the letters that Georgia retrieved that day the intended target? Was she a victim of wrong place, wrong time? We just may never know. Thanks for joining us. Pretty dope. Alright guys, real fast. So we are at the cemetery where they set up the last memorial for Georgia. Oh, we're blinking. Whoa! As soon as we... Is there anybody Weckler here with us? George Weckler, is that you? Can you make it blink red? Is it Georgia's family at all? Guess not. If there's anybody from the Weckler family with us, can you make our meter blink again? Oh.
Here's George.
Oh, we're right by George's. Her grandfather's grave. I got long hair. Anybody with us that wants to communicate with us? Can you make our meter blink again? We're sorry about Georgia. That was. It was like when we were talking about it. It made it creepier. Yep. Is anybody from the Weckler family? Oh, it's going crazy. Anybody from the Weckler family with us? Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, that's. I don't even know what to say. We're sorry about Georgia. We're sorry about your loss. And we haven't forgotten. And we're telling her story. We wish that she would have been found. Maybe one day she will be. Can you make our meter go red? Turn it to red if you want to talk with us. Or if you want us to leave, make it turn red. I feel weird.
Yeah.
Well, like somebody's out there working on their car.